Hey, good morning. This is Shawn from Voices from the Dirt Road. It's so good to see you. This week, let me just tell you right up front, this show is being recorded early. However, guess what? It's going to be a great show. Today, I just want to open it up by saying this. We're going to make this show is going to be focused on succession planning and a couple other things, but I will talk about that a little bit later. But I do want to make sure that everybody understands that when you look at our stool, you will clearly understand as we work our way through this process that no matter which subject that we're talking about today in this episode, it fits into livestock, it fits into row crops, it fits into forestry, and ultimately one of the offices that you potentially would get help from would be from the U.S. Agriculture. So at the end of the day, what I want to say to you this morning, I think you're going to love this episode. I think this is going to be an episode that you're going to be able to sit down with your family and have some hard discussions so that as you move through your process of becoming a farm or trying to transfer the farm on to somebody else, you may have one or two golden nuggets that you can have to work from. So with that, have a good day, and I'll see you out there. Hey, guys, how you doing? Shawn Harris here from Voices from the Dirt Road. We got an outstanding guest today. We're going to have a great conversation about a lot of things when it comes to agriculture that we talk about all the time sitting around the kitchen table, but many a times we don't actually have an expert to help us work through some of these complex things of, okay, grandpa, granddaddy, whoever bought a farm 100 years ago. How do you pass that down from person to person? Or on top of that, corporate America comes in and say, hey, I want to give you $1 million and build a beautiful neighborhood. What are the right answers? Today, we're going to get into all those kind of things here on the show. And I'm so excited to have Brooks. Brooks, can we get Brooks on in the show? Let's get ready to start talking about this thing. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Shawn. How are you?
Good, man. I'm so excited to have you on the show. The things that we're going to be able to talk about today when it comes to the farm, I think is going to be something that our viewers have been longing for to say, hey, how do you do these things? Or better yet, where should I go and talk to the right people? Or better yet, should I be selling the farm or should I try to hold on to the farm? These are normal questions that happen to farmers and families all across America. So I'm looking forward to having that discussion with you. But before I get into it too much, can you just take a few minutes and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you having me here, Shawn. I've been looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Brooks Lamb. I am an author. I have written several books, including one called Love for the Land, Lessons from Farmers Who Persist in Place, and several essays and op-eds and other articles and some bad poems too. Writing aside, I also teach a class as an adjunct professor at Rhodes College. That class is called Agriculture, Society, and the Environment. And I work full-time with a national nonprofit conservation organization called American Farmland Trust. I'm the special advisor for strategic communications at American Farmland Trust. And it's a really terrific organization doing great work across the country, and it's been doing great work for a long time. I will also mention briefly, Shawn, I do a lot of work on agriculture and in rural communities. I'm also from a rural community, and I grew up on a small family farm myself. Family's farm is about 50 miles south of Nashville in rural Tennessee. And that place has really helped shape me into who I am. So I owe a lot to those 75 acres.
Well, I tell you, I have friends that spent time with me in the military and have actually now retired in that part of Tennessee that you're talking about. It's beautiful. I've been to that part of Tennessee. It looks very similar to here in Northwest Georgia where I'm at, rolling hills, mountains, depending on what you want to call them. But I tell you, let's jump on into this thing, because today when I was out and about, got in conversation with a couple of farmers, and the conversation is a normal conversation that I hear all the time. It feels as if we are losing the American farm because everybody's buying up all the land, or when land comes available, a farmer cannot afford to buy it, so that corporate America or somebody else comes in and buy it. The next thing you know, is houses being planted everywhere versus soybeans, peanuts, cotton, and whatever else. So can you kind of lead us through a discussion on what should we be telling the farmers in this type situation?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Shawn, and it is really a huge concern across the country. We as a nation are losing a tremendous amount of agricultural land to non-farm uses, things like suburban sprawl, subdivisions, low density housing, also kind of warehouse development, strip malls, all sorts of different uses are really taking over what were agricultural lands. And we have the data to show how this has been happening, and how if we don't change our ways and start to value farmland a little bit more as farmland, we could be in a good bit of trouble. The word crisis, I think, is often overused, but I think we are potentially facing a crisis of farmland conversion. Across the country, data from American Farmland Trust suggests that in the next 20 years or so, by the year 2040, we could convert over 18 million acres of agricultural land to non-farm uses, just in the next, again, roughly 2 decades. To try to help us wrap our heads around that 18 million acres figure, that's about the size of the entire state of South Carolina. Wow. So picture that much agricultural land just gone, because we know once you put houses all over a pasture or you pave over a cornfield, that land's never coming back into agriculture. We see that some states are feeling this farmland loss crisis more acutely than others. Where you are in Georgia, for example, our data suggests that by 2040, if we continue along our recent development trends, the state of Georgia will convert about 800,000 acres of farmland. If trends accelerate, that number could escalate to over 1 million acres of farmland converted by 2040. Where I am, and where I am in Tennessee too, Tennessee's projected to convert over 1 million acres if trends continue. So southern states are really feeling this intensely.
And you know, when I'm just riding around just today, I saw an area that a farmer used to own, but it was hardwoods and all those kind of things. So it wasn't converted into a pasture or anything, but it was still hardwood. Just I guess a few weeks ago, it sold, and immediately it's large equipment out there knocking down the trees, and they're already building houses and putting in roads. And I know from a farmer point of view, even here on my farm, the hardwoods you can't make enough money off them, so you struggle to try to convert that piece of property into pasture land or to something else, where the guys who are building houses, they buy it up and kind of go from there. So my question that I'm asking is this: what should we be doing as farmers to be able to compete, or is this something that we're not going to be able to stop as time go on here in 2040?
Yeah, it's interesting. We see those specific farms and communities starting to transition, and oftentimes it happens slowly. And so sometimes we don't grasp the enormity of the change that's happening across the landscape. But when we look at this data and when we see time after time these farms that are being converted, we start to realize how big this challenge is. In terms of steps that farmers could take to try to help them hold on to their land, to keep it in agriculture while also remaining viable as a business, because we know that that's really important in agriculture, right? Maintaining economic viability. There are a few things that American Farmland Trust has suggested. One of those is using a creative legal tool called a conservation easement. Essentially, a conservation easement takes the development rights that are associated with a piece of property and then severs those from that property in perpetuity. Now, someone they still own the farm, They can still farm on it. They can practice forestry. They can pass it down to their heirs. They can sell it to a new owner. But once that conservation easement goes in place, that land will always be a farm. It will always be a forest. It can't be converted to some of those other uses. In some states, including in Georgia, where you are now, legislatures and state governments have decided to invest in farmland protection.
Okay.
They're actually compensating farmers for giving up their development rights because they know that there's economic value associated with those development rights. And so for farmers who want to hang on to their land, who want to pass it on to the next generation, or maybe who want to make it more affordable for someone outside of their family to have a chance to purchase, a conservation easement can be a great way to guarantee that the land remains a farm, gives them a way to get a little capital, a little bit of income coming in from selling those development rights, and helps them reach multiple goals all at once. So that is one strategy that I think is really useful.
That's awesome. So when they go into this particular program, say for instance, 5 years down the road, they change their mind. I guess my question is, after you're in, or can you change your mind over a period of time?
Once you're in, you're in. It is a big commitment. And so although I advocate all the time for conservation easements, it is not a commitment to be entered into lightly. It's something that you need to talk about with your spouse, with your kids, with anyone in your family, maybe trusted advisors. If you have an estate planning attorney or other financial advisors, it's something you need to be really, really thoughtful about. There are, like I said, several different programs, whether they're federal programs from the Natural Resources Conservation Service or state level programs. In some places, there are even county level programs where county governments have decided it's important for us to maintain agricultural land in our community. So we're willing to pay to help make that happen. There are programs that can make this process a lot easier and a lot more beneficial for farmers. But regardless of any funding or anything along those lines, this is a permanent decision that families need to think very seriously about before moving forward.
And I like what you said. This is definitely not only the individual, the farmer, but it's also the entire family, because this is going to be a big decision, a major decision, and a decision that's going to be lasting forever. So does it look like farmers are going down this road, or they kind of letting it still hang out there and praying everything's going to work out, and farms are being sold like hotcakes? What are you seeing out there?
We have seen a lot of farmers really interested in conservation easements. There are millions and millions of acres across the nation that are protected by conservation easements. And a lot of farmers, as I mentioned earlier, have found this to be a way not only to protect their land and legacy, but also a way to generate some economic viability, because they're wanting to hang on to their farms anyway. And if there is a program out there that might pay them a few $100,000 for their development rights, they might be able to take that money and finally upgrade the tractor on their family farm, build that new hay barn that they've been putting off, install some cross fencing that they haven't been able to afford to install. Or we've also seen situations where conservation easements can be a really effective succession planning tool. So
that was going to be my next question for you, is as you working through all these things, because everything that we're talking about kind of feeds right into the next, and succession planning. First of all, can you tell us basically what that is? And then two, are farmers doing it? And if they are, is it something they can do on their own, or do they need to go find a lawyer to do this particular process?
Yeah, great questions. So succession planning in its most simple form is really just looking to the future of the land, of the farm business itself, and trying to figure out what's going to happen when an aging generation either retires or, to be blunt, dies. That's something that none of us like to think about. I'm not particularly excited to think about my own death. but it is going to happen one of these days. And so we need to be prepared for when that moment hits, because when that moment hits, families are usually in a grieving process, right? And so the last thing you want to be trying to figure out while you're grieving the loss of a loved one is what's going to happen with one of our biggest economic assets, and we have no earthly idea. So you want to be thoughtful about that up front. In terms of, people who can help in that process, there are a few pieces of advice that I often share with farmers when they are just starting to think about succession planning. The first and arguably the most important is to start the conversation. Correct. Because it's kind of like breaking a rusty bolt free, right? Sometimes what you got to do is put your socket or put your wrench on that bolt and kick it. Right? You can't just sit there and put gentle pressure, because you're never going to break that rust free. So sometimes you got to put a lot of force in, and starting that conversation can be that kick to the wrench that gets the bolt to start to loosen. So sit down with your family, say, hey, we need to talk about what's going to happen with the farm.
And sometime, since you said that, sometime it is not the senior person in the family that's having this conversation, because the senior person in the family may say, hey, I'm still in the game. I'm good. I don't want to have this conversation. It may be that younger person in the family that brings this conversation about, so that we can start getting things in place and pass it on to that next generation. So please go ahead. But I just wanted to insert that too many times I think on the farm, with people think we may be talking about the farmer, because we all sit at the table, and only one of us is considered the head of the table. But it may take somebody that sits not at the head of the table to actually bring this conversation up and break that boat loose, at least to start having the conversation.
Exactly. It's a great point, Shawn. And oftentimes we do see that it is a child or a spouse or someone who has to get that conversation started. For a long time, I've heard farmers say some variation of, I want to die in my boots, or I hope I die on the tractor, in the backfield, on the farm, or while I'm feeding my cows, or whatever. And on the one hand, that is really admirable, and it's inspiring even. And on the other hand, if that happens without any forethought for who's going to take over after that, then the farm's done.
Right. The farm is in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So it is really important to start those conversations, and it's not going to be a quick conversation. It's not one that you're going to have around the kitchen table for 30 minutes over breakfast and figure out. It's sometimes going to take years to eventually work its way out.
I would tell you, if it's like my immediate family, it's 5 of us when it comes to the kids. And in my immediate family, all 5 of us were in agreement on keeping the farm and keeping things going and all those kind of things. But suppose the family dynamics is different, that you have 5 kids and 2 want to keep the farm going and the other 3 want to sell it and make $1 million and split it. Can you how do they get to yes on those particular things?
Yeah, it could be tricky, but there are paths forward. And a friend of mine who does a lot of really good work in this field often encourages the farmers and ranchers that he works with, everyone in the family who's involved, on their own, sit down and sketch out their dream situation. If everything worked out perfectly, what would happen from your perspective? And then everyone share that, knowing that it's very unlikely that anyone is going to get 100% of the way there on their dream situation.
Right.
But at least we can all be open and talk about where we're all coming from and what we'd like to see, because there are a lot of assumptions out there about what a brother or a sister may be feeling, or what a mom or a dad may be feeling. And sometimes farm families aren't the best about being honest about their emotions, right?
Exactly.
We keep things a little closed up sometimes. I know that myself, coming from a farm family. but we got to be open and honest and talk with one another so we can see where we all stand. And once we start that conversation, the second thing that I often tell people is to put together a team and try to get a coach, right? Mm-hmm. So for a lot of things that we do in life, if it's learning to play guitar or trying to get better at a sport, mm-hmm. we rely on a tutor or a teacher or a coach, right? Someone who's been through this before, who has expertise and understanding and will pass that on to us. So when you start that succession planning journey, work with someone who is experienced in this. It could be an attorney you trust. Yeah. American Farmland Trust, where I work, we actually have a national program that we run called Land Transfer Navigators, where we're working with conservation professionals across the country to get them the education and resources and experience needed so that they can be that coach to help someone navigate a process. And then assemble a team of people who know their field really well. Someone who understands the finances and the taxes, who understands the legal aspect, who understands the farming aspect and maybe a business planning approach for the next generation. Mm-hmm. Get people who know how to do this work from all of their different angles. And then one of the last things I would suggest is use trusted resources. There's a lot of information out there, and some of it's great, and some of it's less than great.
Yeah. Everything that you see on the internet is not true.
Exactly. And so use trusted resources. American Farmland Trust has a website that's farmlandinfo.org. And it's a clearinghouse of information where people can go to learn about succession planning or any other number of topics.
What my team behind the scenes will make sure that we get that website up to ensure that people will be able to go there and look for themselves. You know, one of the things that I do on my particular show here is we provide information to our listeners, because I think so many times when you start talking about the rural community or you're talking about the farms, conversations are being had, but it's a lot of gaps. And as you know, many a times you'll have a farm, and I'll use myself as an example. Born and raised on a farm, went off to the military, came back. I am still connected to that farm in Southwest Georgia as a family member. However, I decided to go and purchase my own farm, me as Shawn Harris, buy my own farm and start a cattle farm. What we're talking about, and what makes this so good for me as a new farmer, or at least I'll say a new farmer in this capacity, is that yes, we're in the process of starting the farm. We got everything in place, but it is never too late to start talking about succession planning. Because I think sometimes some people may be listening to us may say, well, that's something that you probably should talk about when you're in your 80s. You know, I want to make sure that our audience understand that when you purchase your property, or if you inherit your property, you need to be having that discussion, because like we talked about earlier, you don't know what tomorrow is going to be. And I have seen so many farms get bought up because something bad happened and the heirs could not agree. And the property then goes into tax problems. And the next thing you know, either another farm try to catch it, or the other farm didn't have the money to catch it at that particular time. And somebody else from a corporate America or representative of corporate America, they got a lot of money, come in and catch the thing. And the next thing you know, a farm that was producing peanuts, soybeans, cotton, whatever it was producing, is now growing houses. So am I on the right track with that to tell everybody across the board it's never too late to start this succession planning?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say too, you know, I know firsthand that it's hard. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you in my capacity as a professional working in this space on a podcast that people across the country are going to hear, and my own family still doesn't have our own succession plan figured out, right? And so I know that it's hard,
Yeah.
but it is really important to at least try to start working on and try to start coming together and figuring out a vision. And you're right. If we can do that when farmers, the main operators of the farm are in their 40s and 50s, or maybe early 60s, as opposed to their late 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
The other thing is, things can change.
Mm-hmm.
You could start a succession plan that feels really good and right now. And then if you're still farming 15 years later and you decide, actually, we should revisit that. The world's changed, things have changed, circumstances have changed. You can always revisit it, but it's really important to have something in place in case the unthinkable happens or in case some other scenario comes along that forces you into big decisions quicker than you were expecting to have to make them.
Yeah, and I just remember as a kid and then as a young adult. I'm not a young adult anymore, but I do remember having conversations because my father passed when I was 2 years old. My mom had the farm, but other farmers helped us because I was two. My oldest brother was only 11, so other farmers helped us keep that farm up and going. And then we got of age and we kept running it. But I clearly remember having discussions on which one of y'all kids want to stay here on the farm and work versus which one of y'all guys are going to go off and do other things. And it wasn't a judgment thing. It was not a judgment thing. But in my own family, one of my siblings clearly said, hey, I'm going to stay here and run the farm. And that particular sibling still today, even though we all own it, but that particular sibling is the one who's actually running the day-to-day operations of the farm. And I think that's also part of the conversations that you need to have, because one thing I know for a fact, you can't, if you got a job working on Wall Street, you can't run a farm in Southwest Georgia during peanut season. I mean, at the end of the day, we're a long way from spreadsheets. So the reason why I say this is because I think that conversation needs to happen around the family that says you all still own it, but who's responsible for the day-to-day? Who's making sure that when they send the tax bill, that the tax bill actually get paid? The unfortunate piece, I've actually seen land that have actually went up for sale for a tax burden is because the tax bill went to the family member that lived in New York City, but the family member moved and did not change the address, and the small little town county didn't have anywhere to send it and didn't know how to get in touch with the rest of the family members. The next thing you know, it's behind on the taxes, and they don't have a phone number to call. So the point of that piece of the conversation is to say to our audience, keep your records with your county, keep your records with the FSA office or the NRCS office, wherever you're doing all your records. Make sure that information stays up to date, because too many farms are being lost today simply because they don't know how to get in touch with anybody. And it is people that are watching the tax sales to try to come in and buy a whole tract of land. And sometimes a tract could be 1,000 acres. Most people are always thinking about 2 and 3 acres. No, a tract could be a half a county or something. So I think that's just very important that everybody understands that. So Succession, what other advice would you give our audience? And I know I'm gonna tell you up front, I'm gonna bring you back on a series of shows because, man, you the right guy, because I want to have almost like an episode that we actually get in the weeds and break these things down so that when a family is trying to have these conversations, they can just turn you and I on YouTube. You know, everybody learns everything from YouTube. So they can just turn us on YouTube and say, hey, it was just two guys having a conversation, but they was actually having a conversation about some real stuff that we need to be thinking about and kind of go from there. So what else should we be telling the people that you and I are probably going to have to come back and talk more on detail on?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I know what I'm talking about, but I sure do like to talk, so I'm happy to do that.
Well, you sound good.
Yeah, well, thank you. Right back at you. So, yeah, I mean, one other thing that comes to mind related to succession planning and our earlier conversation before that about conservation easements and trying to slow down farmland loss is the way that conservation easement can be used as a succession tool. So let's imagine a not so hypothetical situation where there's a farming couple who have two kids, right? And one kid, Sarah, she wants to take over the farm. It's the only thing she's ever wanted to do is farm, and she just can't wait for that opportunity.
Right.
Sarah's got a brother named Bill who has just never loved farming. He lives in the city somewhere. He's a professional in some field, and he's just not looking to ever be back on the farm. But he wants his fair share of the inheritance, which is fair, right? You understand that,
right?
The way that a conservation easement could potentially help this family navigate that situation, the couple could protect their, let's call it 100-acre farm with a conservation easement, right? It's going to be a farm now forever. If they were able to do that through a program that compensates for them for those development rights, what we usually call a purchase of agricultural conservation easement or PACE program,
right?
They might get several $100,000 for those development rights because so much of the value of land is the potential to develop it into some other use. So they may get that influx of cash. And then when it comes time for them to retire and step away, or maybe when they die, they could leave that cash to Bill, who wants his fair share of inheritance, but doesn't want the farm. So he could get the cash portion of that. They could leave all of the land to Sarah.
Yes.
So Sarah's gotten the farm, which is what she wanted.
And Bill, she was probably already working on it and making it function anyway.
Yeah, and building sweat equity and all of those things. So Sarah's getting what she wants. Bill is being treated fairly and isn't being saddled with a piece of property that he's not actually really wanting to take over. It really works out well for everyone in that situation. So there are options. I guess if there's one thing I could get across here, there are options other than, well, we need to just sell the farm to someone else and divide the money up equally.
Right.
And there are options beyond, well, let's just split the farm down the middle, because eventually you could end up splitting a farm so many times that it's no longer viable as a farm.
Right.
And then you don't really have much you can do with that land. So just kind of a piece of encouragement to folks to be creative, be thoughtful, and really sit down and think about what your goals are, and then go to an expert to figure out if there's a way to achieve them, rather than just assuming that you'll never be able to make it happen.
Well, I thank you for that, because that's a very good, easy scenario, so people can really put that in their brain and think through it, because that's a real world situation. Before we close this show out, or I won't even say this show because you coming back this episode out, right now in the United States, the average farmer is 59 years old. Okay. And then on top of that, we are struggling to be able to have a path that young farmers can actually get into this business. especially if your parents or grandparents didn't already own land. So is it any advice or anything that we could be talking about to try to help young farmers? I know you have all the different programs and things out there, but still the fact remains, you got to take on some serious risks. It's going to be some hard work. But do you have any advice for those young farmers? Because I think that's an element that we also need to be talking to, if not all today, but maybe somewhere in the future that can help them. Because guess what? The succession plan works. Okay. Dad's gone, grandma's gone, whatever. Now you own the farm. That farm immediately goes back. In my mind, that farm goes from being somebody that used to own it that was 80 some years old, highly respected in the community, the whole 9 yards, to now you 36 years old. Yeah, you've been working on that farm forever, but I'm not 100% sure that's the same places that your parents or grandparents had credit or enough respect or confidence. The companies had confidence in them that they will give you the same thing when you walking in there. So can you touch on young farmers for a bit?
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned that statistic about the average age of the American farmer, which is high. There's also another statistic that I think maybe doesn't get talked about enough. The average age of a new and beginning farmer in the US, someone who's been farming for 10 years or less, is like 47 or something like that, right? So that signifies that a lot of people are maybe choosing to farm as a second career. Maybe they're coming back and they were a veteran and they did 20 years of service and they want to start farming, or maybe they worked a job on Wall Street, to use the example you used earlier, and want to come back to the farm. And I'm not in any way criticizing that. That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And that statistic shows just how hard it is for someone in their 20s or 30s to be able to get a start in agriculture. And I'll share a personal story, Shawn. I mentioned my family's farm in rural Tennessee, about an hour south of Nashville. Last fall, 34 acres came up for sale less than a mile from my family's farm.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I would love to get on a farm of our own.
Mm-hmm.
Those 34 acres didn't have a house on it. There's no barn, there's no farm infrastructure. And if you tried hard enough, you could probably blow the perimeter fencing down yourself. I mean, it was, not the best shape. So you couldn't even farm it immediately. You couldn't turn cows into it.
Right.
Over $1 million, over $30,000 an acre for that piece of property, without even anywhere you could sleep the first night you were there, unless you put a tent out, right? And so there's often this belief among a lot of people that the next generation doesn't want to farm. Kids don't want to farm these days. They don't want to work that hard. And that may be true at times. Farming is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the real crux of it is that getting into farming is extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only do you have to buy that land, but you're going to need a tractor, and Lord knows those are more expensive than ever.
And the inputs are out the roof.
Exactly. And so it really is a huge affordability issue for the next generation. And you're right. There are programs out there. There are government loan programs.
Mm-hmm.
There are organizations like American Farmland Trust offering technical assistance and grant programs. And there are organizations like the National Young Farmers Coalition that try to help farmers and aspiring farmers take steps toward getting into agriculture. And all of those things are great.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the exact answer is here, but we've got to figure out some sort of way societally to help more young people get onto land and make it more affordable for them to do so. We don't need to necessarily give everything away. We want people to have skin in the game. I understand that.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. You got to have skin in the game.
Yeah, we've got to figure out a way to either bring land prices down or make young farmers more competitive on the market. Because what we've often seen is that when a farm goes up for sale, either it can get taken out of agriculture and a subdivision or a strip mall or something like that goes onto it,
right?
Or the large scale farm or one of the really large scale farms in the area that has a lot of capital, that has a lot of access to credit, they can subsume that land and continue expanding their operation and getting bigger and bigger while the next generation struggles to get onto smaller acreage. So I don't have all the answers, but it is, in my mind, one of the biggest issues facing the future of not only agriculture, but of rural communities in general.
Well, what I would tell you, we've been talking now for about 40 minutes. And what I would tell you as we close out is this. I think when people see this, this particular show that we're doing here on the podcast, it's going to generate a lot of questions. And what I really wanted to do is to ask that question about the young farmer, so that when you come back and we specifically talk about young farmers, talk about all the programs, what we will do is advertise that to young farmers so they can actually ask questions. Because I think it's important to give them a place where they can feel comfortable to just ask the question. Yes, we can point them back probably to the same place they already been before, but it just helps to say, okay, I could actually ask the question. Because too many times I think individuals want to get into farming and somebody tells you you shouldn't do that. You're not going to be able to make any money. And basically tell you your dream is not what it's supposed to be. I will tell you, after doing 40 years in the military and doing all kind of cool stuff for the American people, I actually had people say to me, after all of that, Shawn, you're crazy. Don't go into farming. Don't go into beef cattle. Don't do this. Don't do that. And what I basically said to him is this: tell me at what point in this life that I supposed to live my dream. Just tell me at what point do I supposed to say is enough to get off the treadmill like a little hamster and say, okay, let me do something for once in my life that I want to do. And I didn't listen to him. I went and bought my own farm, and I'm proud that we raising cattle out there. And just today we just had another calf. So it's working. We're not the biggest farm. And I'll be honest with you, I think most farmers have no desire to be the biggest farm in the United States. Most farmers say, I want to keep it small so that I can handle it. Maybe my son or daughter help me out, or it's something that I do when I come home from work, so I get the rest of it done. So I want to just say thank you for coming on the show. I look forward to talking to you again. I think when this episode is played here in the next day or so, I think you're going to be getting all kind of phone calls, emails, and I want to make sure, because I think when you first got on the show, you told me that you have wrote several books and different things, and so I want to make sure that we that people know how to reach out to you to say, hey, can you help me or help us better understand how to navigate? Now, I know that you're not the guy that says this is what you're supposed to do, step 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But your job and my job is just to provide information and allow those families and farms to figure out what is best for them. Because I think you and I can both agree that we don't want to wake up tomorrow and we look around and all of our small town America has just turned into a strip mall. I like my Starbucks, but I don't want Starbucks in my little bitty small towns that used to be a farm, or Probably the better way to say it, I have lived and been blessed to live in some very nice neighborhoods, but it has always hurt my heart when I went into a very nice neighborhood and the streets are named after like little, farm stuff, and you realize that, wait a minute, this neighborhood that has 300 plus houses in it used to be a dairy farm. That's when it actually hits you and say, what did we do? We just destroyed America, because at the end of the day, X amount of farms gone. The next thing you know, we won't be able to feed ourselves. And our farmers are the ones that is the backbone of America, and they're the ones that feed us. So, hey, I just want to say thank you. Do you have anything else you want to say to the audience as we close out?
Yeah, just a few things. I want to be clear with listeners too. I nor American Farmland Trust are anti-development, right? We know that we need places to live and work and eat and shop. But I think we need to be more thoughtful about where we're putting those places and more strategic about where we're putting them. So again, I know we need housing. We need more affordable housing across the country. We need places where people can go to work and recreate. But it is really important to value agricultural land. And towards your point earlier, there are a few things in the world that tick me off more than when I drive past a subdivision that's named something like Smith Acres. That used to be the Smith Farm,
exactly,
and now it's a subdivision. So I understand that too. And then I guess the last couple things, whether you are a young person who is an aspiring farmer, or whether you're an older farmer who's trying to think about the future, I would encourage you to check out American Farmland Trust's website, farmland.org. And there's also the website I mentioned earlier, farmlandinfo.org. And on that site, some of my coworkers and colleagues have built out entire toolkits to help aspiring farmers find farmland, find capital, find organizations that can help them. And then for aging farmers looking for succession planning resources, there's fact sheets and guides and workbooks and all these things to try to help them through that process. So check those resources out. And then, if anyone is interested, I have written a good bit about this topic. If you'll go and Google Love for the Land book, it should bring that up at some point, and you'll be able to read a little bit more about some of the things that I've been writing on. And Shawn, I just want you to know, I really appreciate you inviting me on for the conversation. It's been a great one, and I'm happy to hear that there are so many people who care about the future of agriculture.
Again, thank you for your expertise. I look forward to talking to you again about some other things. And again, thanks. That's all I can say. And I will tell you, I look forward to having you back on the show real soon. Everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye.